Well, yeah, thank you so much for doing this. When did you get back into Austin? Because like I feel like every time I look at your story, you are just bouncing around, like you're all over the place this season.
I am. I got back on like Sunday evening from McAllen, Texas for RGV, and then I feel like I went on. Oh, I went to California. I think the week before that for like 4 days, and so I've been back home for like a couple of days now. Then I went like straight back to work, and then I'm going. Oh, wait, the camera just connected.
So we'll kind of dive back in. I think like we were just talking about you getting back into work like now that you're back home, right?
Yes. Yeah, worked Monday, Tuesday, and then today I'm off, and then going to Vegas on Friday. And that should be my last trip, hopefully before the Olympia. So it's been a ton of travel.
That's insane. Yeah. And I mean, like, for listeners who aren't familiar with you, which like I don't think anyone's like following the sport and unfamiliar with you. I mean, like you've been active this season. You've done how many shows?
8, I think.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. And I mean, that's like pretty much every other weekend, every 2 weeks, right?
Most of them were all in a row. And then sometimes I had a week off in between, and then I think I had 3 weeks before Texas that I was off for.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Gosh. I mean, like, it's been really cool because I mean, like, for me, I think I left LA like right when maybe you were kicking off this season, but like we both trained at Golds. I was still in nursing school, so I was there at like the weirdest hours. So but I mean like it's been so cool to see that transition now working with Will, which you've been with him for how long?
It's been a little over a year now.
Okay. Yeah, that's I mean that's incredible. And I mean like for listeners who aren't familiar, it's like working with the coach. I know some competitors they go coach to coach to coach and they like see how someone operates in the course of 6 months and kind of makes their assessment there. But like I feel like it really doesn't do the coach justice. It doesn't give them time to really like work on your physique and especially at your level and like with the sport of competing, it's like you really need to see like what does that look like from the inception of a prep through that post show period. And yeah, I mean like you guys like have made significant improvements even since that first show this season.
Yes. Honestly, I only took really like a few months off before we started prep for this year. And I'm just like mind blown at how much I was able to improve during that short off season because I was working overtime as a nurse and I was only training 4 days a week and I couldn't even get my food up very high for like the first half of the reverse because it had just been such a long prep last year. But I was just so blown away by the improvements this prep. I mean, my first look at the season two was just so improved from last year. And as soon as I started working with Will, though, it's like he can take a client on and he doesn't even need that much time to like learn their body because he's so skilled that he will get somebody responding so quickly, which was what I needed. And I just like really aligned with his coaching values really well. And so it's just been an amazing year where I've learned so much as an athlete and I've developed so much. And it's just been everything's just so efficient and very like health focused. So all my training and my diet is like so very intentional and so thus time efficient that I'm able to improve so quickly while doing like so much less cardio, eating so much more food. So I'm just so grateful for his guidance in this last like year.
No, that's incredible. And I mean, like I'm sure you've heard stories from other competitors where they're with the coach and the food just keeps getting lower, the cardio just keeps getting higher. And like, especially if someone's competing, like the look tends to follow suit. Like you just have that weathered look. I know I've had that before working with coaches who I wouldn't, it's not saying anything bad about them. It's just like it didn't really click. Like they didn't really understand my body or have the time to like give me that true attention to detail of what I needed. So it's amazing. I'm glad you found that. I guess so, like when we go back to before working with Will, what I guess where did you end that last season at in terms of like the physique? Like what was the feedback from the judges and like where were you at with like where what improvements you needed to make?
Last year when I joined with Will, I wasn't too far out of the Olympia, and my last feedback at the time was more upper glutes and a little more upper body. So kind of just like overall a little more growth. And I needed it because, and I honestly am amazed too by how much I improved from like early last year, where I feel like I was so much smaller. My physique was not nearly as mature as it is now. So, and it really hasn't been that long. But I continued training hard, but also not overdoing it. Because with a nursing career, you have to, find that balance. So I was just working on building upper glutes and a little more upper body. And we did that. We came in with like good conditioning. We experimented with some different looks, different fullness. Um, but I knew like I needed more glutes. And then we really did that in this last off season. So the feedback from the judges has a lot of times been more upper body for me. Conditioning is usually not a problem, and it's not really that difficult to get my body down to where it needs to be. But it was more so I just really aligned more with like the methods of coaching under him. That I feel like things just like really took off because we were just so in sync and like in touch on every single detail of the prep.
That no, that's incredible. And like I know I've seen on your story before, like talking about like, okay, I'm training less or what seems like less than others might say I should be. I'm doing less cardio, I'm eating more, which is kind of like it's the opposite of what a lot of people think when it comes to contest prep. But I think that's like really a testament to the amount of fatigue that you have to manage doing what you do. And then also like being this active throughout the season. I think the longevity of it, like a lot of people think it's just less food, less food, less food to bring tighter physiques or to bring better physiques. But realistically, like I think a lot of people look better being fed and not being run into the ground. But I guess when we look at this season so far, so I mean, like I love that pick stitch you did. I think it was like all 8 shows where you're like, okay, like this was my favorite look. This was the look that got this feedback. This was my win. I guess with when we look at the girls you're competing against, because you've been in some stacked lineups, and I mean, like even getting to commentate this weekend at RGV. I mean, like those girls, I was really impressed with the density. I know my client, like we both were like, yeah, like this is gonna take some time to achieve that. Really, when you look at like your structure and like being able to capitalize on that size or like the size that's needed to be competitive, what would you say has been like really the biggest game changer in terms of nutrition that's allowed you to kind of consistently peak and bring that fullness?
Um, it's the fact that so in the past I had had diets where I thought it was amazing that I was carb cycling, and at the time, I was like, "This is so amazing that I haven't had this in my preps before." But then as I continue to learn more about the metabolism and more detail-oriented coaching, I learned that having 2 set days a week for high days isn't really the most effective way, and so I now check in almost every day in prep, or at least every couple few days. And we will do high days depending on what I'm training, if I'm working, what my weight's been doing the last couple days. And sometimes we'll do 2 in a row, and sometimes we'll only refeed with a certain amount. But I honestly only really kept on like a low carb diet for maximum of like 3 days at once because then my metabolism would respond so well to that bump in food that would keep the baseline food higher. And so we just had so many high carb days this prep that I think that obviously is going to contribute to you being able to train better and keep the muscle fullness and everything. So, and I'm just so happy because I'm not, I mean, you're still hungry, but I'm so happy because I know I'm still eating a lot. I'm still getting the nutrients I need. So I just think being able to eat so much more because if you really look at the check-in, if you really look more in depth about what someone's doing with their training and their work schedule and how much sleep they got or what their weight did over the last 2 days, then you can really like pull those levers and just finesse the metabolism so much more.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched on a really important point here. I mean, several important points, but like the training performance. And with someone like yourself who's like, you're consistently getting that feedback, come in denser, like maintain this density, want this fullness on your physique. And I mean, you're 5'5", 5'6".
I'm 5'3" and a half. actually.
5'3.5". Well, yeah, I mean, like, even with your frame, it's still like, okay, for a lot of people, they're not really gonna benefit by having that super flat look on stage, especially with the level of competition where most girls, they're not coming in super flat. So, I think, like, the fact that you're able to maintain training performance, especially after this many shows, I mean, I think that's, like, a full testament to really, like, being able to secure that win, like, at the end of a like, at the end of a season or really, like, after so many attempts. But
Yeah.
when you look at, like, the actual peaking process and, like, how that's changed from how you've done it in the past and how confident you felt, like, getting on stage, what would you say historically is, like, the mindset really that you've taken? And, I mean, obviously, you've already covered, like, how much of a change it is now working with Will and his protocol.
Mhm. To be honest, the most majority of my bodybuilding career, I would have a lot of anxiety going into shows because the peak and how I ended up looking on show day wasn't always like exactly what I thought that we were going for, or sometimes I wasn't sure how I would end up looking in terms of the fullness or the conditioning. And especially when sometimes, like, you're on macros or things aren't as closely watched, it would just lead me to have more anxiety because I'm like, am I even going to look conditioned or am I going to like small today? But now that I know, like, I check in after every single meal, I give him my weight after every single meal, and he tells me exactly what foods to eat. And I don't have any more stress going into show weekends because I know that we're able to produce a very precise look, especially from the experience we've had doing so many shows together. And honestly, though, going into Texas, I was not confident at all. But I trust Will so much that I wasn't stressed because I was not ready with my conditioning to do the show at all, really. But I trusted him so much that he could make it happen in a week. And he did. And I think that really, like, just releasing my expectations fully with that show helped me do so much better. So, but Texas though, I was like, oh, I really don't. Thursday, I was like, I don't even want to see like the professional pictures my videographer took me. I didn't even want to look because I still didn't look ready. But then over the weekend, like he was able to make it happen and I looked amazing because I was like, I'm not even stressed. I'm just going to trust him. And so now I'm at a point where I have no stress and every peak is completely different. Sometimes my body isn't responding as well and we have to give more food. Um, and sometimes like the Texas, it took really well to the food. Like I felt full that whole peak. Even though we had to really push to get the conditioning there. So every peak's different and I just like let him take the reins and I trust him fully. I continue giving him like all the data, checking in like extremely frequently throughout the show weekend.
No, that I mean, that's so nice to have that and to have that trust in a coach. And, like, I tell girls all the time because oftentimes I'll get calls where girls are working with coaches and they're like, "Hey, I just want some input on my lab work or my PED use or the current timeline, and I just want to know like my completely off base." And it's sad because certain conversations, I would say more often than not, girls are like, "Well, I just don't really trust what we're doing. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, or I don't feel like I'm." Like, not even necessarily their top priority. I don't feel like I'm being considered in terms of like, I'm not where their focus is. And I think like the best looks I've had are ones where the peak has been predictable and it's been, I would say, borderline easy, and like it's been uneventful, not a lot of like magic last minute, just these like micro changes. But I mean, I think that largely comes from one, being ready and being as consistent as you are with both your nutrition and then recovery. And I guess like that kind of segues into what we were talking about before, around really people using like compensations in a way to make up for, let's say, not being ready in terms of conditioning, not having that fullness. And I mean, like, Brittany, when did you start competing? Like, what year was it?
2018.
Okay, yeah. So like you're a vet. You've been in the sport a long time, and like I can think back 2018. I don't think I had stepped on stage. I'd competed before then, but I hadn't come back yet. And realistically, like when I came back in 2020, I mean, like that look was so much denser than what I was used to. And I mean, like even in 2020 compared to now, I mean, the level of competition that we're seeing is just like it's night and day. And I guess the question I have for you is like when you made the decision to work with Will, how much of a factor was that in it around like the supplementation, overall hormonal health? Was that a consideration for you, or was that something Will kind of brought to you as like, this is how I do things?
So yeah, good question. I had always had personal values that I had always expressed to any coach that I wanted to remain as conservative as possible with any supplementation. Um, and I know that I don't feel like I need much. I don't know if it's just genetics, and I do train really hard and I'm consistent year round over the years, so that helps. And then once I got to know Will and learn more about his coaching methods, um, some of the things I had been asked in the past, I would say no, or I would say I don't want to do that much. I don't want to do it, you know, for this long. And then once I got to know Will and learn how he was, I honestly assumed that he would maybe be a coach that would prescribe more to clients because his clients always look so shredded and so incredible. So I was like, oh well, maybe he is heavy on supplementation. But then I learned that he's actually more conservative than any other coach I've ever gotten to know or worked with. And being able to achieve a result focusing more on dietary manipulations and training intensity and training technique really makes me feel like so much more of an athlete and makes me feel so much more cared for and it's so much more fun. And I don't want to live with the worry of taking unnecessary supplementation that I know the levels that the girls I'm competing with take sometimes. And I'm personally not comfortable with that. And I personally don't think that I need that because I do have good genetics for the sport. And so once I learned his coaching methods, saw him peak athletes for shows, and also learned he also aligned with me on that piece. He's also the point of contact who reads my labs and prescribes anything I might need to help with anything in my reverse or during the prep to make sure everything internally is functioning well. So I just agree with it all. I feel very well taken care of because it's really important to me to keep things conservative as possible and only at times that it's really needed, like in prep.
No, I share that same sentiment. And like, I just want to commend you because it's hard at your level. You're very competitive as a pro, which is like, that's saying something right now. Like, that's huge. And the fact that one, you've been able to set boundaries in past coaching relationships and say, like, that's cool, but that's not for me. Like, even if you have other girls doing it, like, that's not really within my comfort zone. I tell a lot of athletes I work with who already have coaches or are just like curious like, hey, like how do I broach that subject? I'm like, you just have to be honest. Like if your gut at all is telling you like this seems like a lot or this seems like something I'm not ready for, even just communicating like it's just not within my scope of comfortability. Like I'm maybe I'll change my mind, but maybe I won't. And like if you're with the right coach, like that really shouldn't be an issue. Even if they've suggested it, like that shouldn't be something that's like a point of contention. But it's so sad because that oftentimes isn't the case. So a lot of people get backlash or then they get kind of like bullied into like, well, every other girl is taking it, or I've used this with this athlete and she's a pro, or this is what's being used at the top level. And I think the fact that one, you're so young and like, I mean, you have a really bright future in the sport. It's really mature of you to kind of see like, okay, even if supplementation is something um, that is being used amongst other athletes. It doesn't have to define personal use. It doesn't have to be something that you compromise on. And I think it says a lot to still be able to be competitive and work within the scope of what you're okay with. Because I mean, like you even said, like it's so much more than just how you look on stage. It's what's happening under the hood. What are your other systems telling you? And realistically, like there are good times to use things, and there are times that it's just not as effective. It's just not the right place yet. I see time and time again girls just thinking Well, yeah, like I'm a bodybuilder, so that means year round I need to have stuff in place.
Yeah. One of the things like Will really stresses to us athletes is that, you know, your femininity, I'm sorry. So it's just, your femininity is very important, and so many women it's easy to get caught up in the moment of the sport and forget about the life after bodybuilding, because bodybuilding is realistically only going to be a short chapter in our life. And many women then end up regretting choices they may have made in the past. And so with Will, he always tells his athletes if we ever start to feel any sort of side effects to let him know immediately. He never pushes anything, always like the lowest possible dose of anything, and then go from there. Because it's so true. Like even I, sometimes will have thoughts of like, oh well, what if I take more of something, and my glutes could look so much bigger, or like my shoulders would look so much bigger. Um, but I'm glad that I haven't like fallen into that, because I know that like the femininity is so important to me, and I think to most of us, but it can be so easy to get caught up in the moment and forget about the long-term impact until we kind of refresh our perspective down the line, and we're like, maybe I wish I hadn't done that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's something that oftentimes it is peer pressure where you talk to other competitors or girls who've done well objectively and you hear what they've taken, or you talk to a coach that maybe you're interviewing considering you're like, "Well, when do you put this in place or how much do you use?" And today I just recorded a video specifically on Anavar, like I think it's like 6 things like people get wrong about it, and like 2 of the major points that I cover, I mean, all 6 are like I feel so passionately about, but like 2 of them are like 5 milligrams isn't going to do anything, because that's a call that I've had like over a dozen times where girls are just like, yeah, like my coach literally told me there's no sense in starting 5, like a 10 is your starting point. And I am very transparent. I'm like, I've used 2.5, I've used 5. It's not like I got double the fullness at 5. Like 2.5 was actually plenty. And like from a weight standpoint, my weight went up about exactly the same. And I think it really goes to show like there often is like in the grapevine this belief that like, oh, she placed higher because she used X, Y, and Z at this dose, or she had this perfect protocol, when in reality it's like, this, like there's so much that goes into someone's placing. But like part of it is depending on who shows up, what their structure is, how good they look, if they're having an off day, if everyone who shows up is super full, if they're super shredded. And I think the other point that I wanted to circle back on is people often assume that without the use of like anabolics, for instance, that they'll just wither away, that they won't have any muscle. And I think it goes to show like with your physique, like you guys have been able to make a lot of manipulations, keep you full, keep you retaining muscle in a very busy season. And also now going into an incredibly competitive show, it's like, if that were the case, like he would look a lot different after this amount of time, or you potentially would be compromising on things that you already said you're not comfortable with.
Yes, exactly. I actually had a very high level coach tell me that you are not going to viralize from taking Invar long term, then that it's not going to viralize at all. And I was like, what? I do not think that that is true based off of, some of the anecdotal evidence I can see. And I think that that's harmful to promote. And it's like very easy, it's very tempting, because it seems like it can be this magic pill. But I just couldn't believe when I heard that from like a very prominent coach. Um, because I don't think that's a message that should be shared to more impressionable women in the sport. And like you said, those low doses can still be like extremely effective.
Totally. And yeah, I completely share that sentiment. It's like labeling any anabolic, even TRT at TRT doses, like labeling that as completely risk-free. It's like there are aspects that can make it less risky. but it's still like respecting the fact that like it's an anabolic, like it's not going to be something that we can make completely devoid of its effects. And so much of that has to do with that individual's sensitivity to androgens. And I think it's often the part that, I mean, like, I'm sure you're familiar with, like, individuals who are like, "Hey, I just lose my period during prep." I always find that, like, immediately I get into it and, like, things start going south, hormonally, like, from a reproductive standpoint, and it's like, that in itself, like, having a low degree of circulating estrogens, that ratio of estrogens to androgens plays a huge role in how your body essentially determines how it's going to use those androgens. And in this sport, we see like it's very prominent and almost like promoted as like, oh, I lose my period or I don't ovulate. Like this is a bonus, but not really considering the fact that that in itself plays against PED use. And you had made the point to say like the high level coach, like they, told you this, like just blanket advice that like, hey, this is okay. This is risk free. Like you won't viralize. But I mean, like, sadly, that is what a lot of amateurs and even national level competitors, pro competitors are being told. And they're kind of looking at that authority, for all their information around this, which, I mean, I share that sentiment that, like, as a coach and as an athlete, like, kind of have the responsibility to make sure, like, individuals know if you're going to be toying with this, like, it's not a free lunch.
Mhm. Exactly.
So I guess like when we look at the Olympia and we look, what you've done thus far, what are the improvements that you guys are going to make in the next 6 weeks, right?
Yes, like 5.5 now. I actually was just rewatching an old video from last year's Olympia, and I feel like I've grown so much and my physique is so much more mature now, like especially my glutes. So, and that was just like very intentional, honestly, lightweight and very controlled training over the off season. But we can still use a little more upper glute, that's kind of always the case. And my legs were a main part of my feedback this year because, to be honest, in the past, and I was told I could downsize my legs, and they weren't really seeming to look for bigger legs in bikini. And now they've been asking for that. And my legs naturally respond really well. So I barely trained them this last off season to focus on my glute growth, and now I need more legs. But at least I know that that's very easy for me to achieve. And my siblings, like we all have like more muscular legs, so it's been really nice to be able to train legs again and feel more like a bodybuilder than just a bikini girl training glutes. So that's the biggest thing is I've been working on, especially my hamstrings, a little bit of quads, still focusing on the glutes and upper glutes, and you also have to, read between the lines. Sometimes if they say you need more legs, you're also going to need a little more upper body so that you'll look balanced. Like that was something I guess I didn't think about was, okay, I just need to build my glutes. But if I build my glutes and my legs don't also come up in proportion, then they're going to look disproportionate. And that's maturing as an athlete about the very fine details of the sport when it comes to picking the best physique on that day. Even though I knew I had these amazing glutes now, I need a little more legs to match. So I've been working on that. And then, of course, like a little more upper body to continue keeping everything in balance. And I feel like we found a really good level of conditioning for me this year. And I've really been enjoying the looks that aren't so lean. Like, I honestly go into a show like barely feeling that shredded. Like, I don't have a lot of veins, I don't have crazy abs, but I've just detached from that and I'm used to it. And now that I have more muscle, I don't need to be as tiny and, peeled to get the muscle to show. And that's also just maturing as an athlete. So we found the conditioning we need, and we're just trying to make sure my legs can look a little bit fuller and everything to be in balance.
I love that you brought that up because that's also the feedback that I'm seeing a lot of girls who've been in the sport as long as you have, they have gotten, which is very like it's kind of the antithesis of what we were taught as bikini competitors. Is, I mean, gosh, like when I competed when I was 19, I was a little thing, and like I remember they told me more glutes, don't bring your quads up anymore, and I'm like, I don't have any quads, like there are none to begin with. But that was very much like mirrored throughout my competition career, is like no legs, no legs, until all of a sudden we started seeing these monstrous glutes with pretty developed legs. And like even being able to see that as you get leaner and be like, okay, like I might look good and I might look good, like, in my own check ins, but compared to these other physiques that just essentially are more mature, like they have more of that density that might actually require, kind of stepping outside the traditional like bikini thought process and putting on size. And I mean, I share that sentiment that like it's fun to have a little more laxity and not be so I mean, like for me, it's scared of building legs because it's like, okay, well, this actually is going to hurt you if you don't do this. Like it could be a reason you place lower. I guess when it comes to really thinking about what it looks like after the Olympia, are you guys going into that show and just going to see how you do, assess from there, and then determine if there are more shows you're going to compete in later this year? Or do y'all have even a soft game plan for post Olympia plans?
Yeah, we did have a plan of taking a nice long break, which I was very excited for because I love off-season life so much and I love prep life. But honestly, to be honest, I was hoping we would qualify in fewer shows this year, and it took longer. And it was good to see myself next to other girls and see like, okay, yeah, I can bring up my legs some more. So did multiple shows though to get the win, more than expected. And last year, I did 10 shows, and so even though my body's responding really well, I feel really good. I know that we can use a long time off, and we are thinking about coming back in the summertime next year. But to just a few hours ago, they announced the new Olympia qualification rules, which is going to make things very interesting. Did you read about that?
So I did. And I mean, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts because I almost take a step back and think that like I mean, this is going to encourage a lot more drug use. If realistically, there's going to be girls competing much more than they already are, which I see that from my perspective is like frequently competing if they're not doing everything right is typically what leads to using drugs to compensate, to maintain that muscle, to maintain that fullness. And hearing that like the point system is back, I'm like, man, that's just going to keep like etching up that competitive nature, which I hope people have like the thought process that you do of like, hey, if I need to make improvements, then I need to be thoughtful about like how often I compete and when I compete. But I'm really curious, yeah, like what does that look like then in terms of like timeline design for post Olympia in the next year?
Yeah, so it might change things for us, and we always have a plan and then we end up doing something last minute. So maybe I have no idea. Maybe we'll jump into a show after the Olympia or start the season a little bit earlier than originally planned if I have made the improvements I've needed to make and my hormone health is all in line. Maybe we'll end up jumping in sooner in case, because I'm like, what if you get a win and you're in the standing, go to the Olympia, and then last minute the point system someone overtakes you because they did so many shows but they haven't won a show, or so I really need to take some time, like sit with it and talk to Will about what our best plan would be. um so, because I do agree there needs to be fewer athletes at the Olympia. It's just hard. There's no way to find a system that's going to make everybody happy. So we have to really like sit down and talk about what that's going to mean for our future plans. Because maybe we'll need to, get a run in earlier than expected or now while we're ready. I have no idea, but very interesting and definitely changes the game from like last year when I won a show in April in the beginning of the season and I was able to mentally relax about worrying about competing or qualifying. And we can't do that anymore. You can't just win a show and relax unless you're winning Pittsburgh Crow or New York Crow, which is only going to be, a couple girls out there possibly, or just Amy again. And so, yeah, it changes things.
Totally, totally. And I mean, I think that's the part that like as spectators, a lot of people forget is that like going into Olympia, like that's obviously the focus. But as a professional athlete who's trying to advance consistently in the ranks, now there's this other leg of it where you really have to consider like, okay, it takes a lot, even for someone like yourself who like genetically is like very versed and you have the muscle and like you don't struggle necessarily getting as lean as maybe other athletes do. You still have to be so thoughtful with like, okay, how much laxity can I have? Because I might have to jump in and I can't just jump in and do okay. Like now we have this carrot of like earning points. So it'll be really interesting. Did they say, is it 26 competitors they're capping it out at?
Well, I think it's the 25 highest amount of points, and then who knows how many additionally might be in there with if you win 2 shows, you're automatically in, but then does that exclude you from the list of 25, or I don't know. And then there's the Pittsburgh, and I think I need to check it out again. So I think it could be more than 25. It could be less, maybe if we're having some repeats in there. I don't know. I didn't look at it too in depth when I processed it fully, but it would definitely be, I mean, about half the size it is now, which is exciting because it will bring a lot of the prestige back to the Olympia and more exciting for the fans. But yeah, about half the size. And
Yeah, because I mean, like, is it 60 girls that are qualified for Olympia, or am I off with that? Is it way more?
I think it's somewhere around 65 now, I want to say.
Yeah.
So it's up there.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I love I mean, and this was kind of inevitable. They were gonna have to like put a cap on it only because there's so many pro shows. And that was something that I've always used to like even talk to my clients about or my own considerations with competing is like you don't really have to land on a specific show because you can kind of just pick one. And as long as you're willing to travel, there's probably gonna be one that you can access. But it does bring into question like and I was talking about this earlier on a podcast is do you hear a lot of the chatter from current bikini pros or athletes maybe you're friends with, you work with, of, wanting to kind of take that second and really consider whether or not they want to go into the fit model division instead?
Um, Other pros that I know of, maybe a couple, yes. And I think it's a good route for girls like coming up in the sport to see if that is the division for them, or if they're not sure they want to push everything you might need to push for bikini. Um, but I don't know many bikini like pros that are considering going down. I think a couple, because there is a big genetic component to it. And especially if a woman is taller and has a more difficult time getting a dense look that's now required in bikini, then Fit Model could be better. And I'm excited to see where Fit Model continues to develop, especially at the pro level. I think it's going to be super exciting. 'Cause I know some people like to downplay it, but thinking back to the look of the standard of former Ashley Kay, it's a very like impressive look with a very solid muscle base. Like you can tell she had been working out for a long time. And I know that there's also a controversy around that because people like to say, oh, well, Ashley Kay was like a D1 athlete for like years. So using her as the standard is not quite achievable to the average girl coming up in sports. So there's that argument. But I think it's a great route because, like you said, just the demand of the standard in bikini now, oftentimes for most people, requires pretty decent levels of supplementation at this point now, depending on genetics, depending on your years of training. So it's a great like alternative that I think is going to develop into something like very impressive and just a healthier look.
I share that sentiment like wholeheartedly. And it's something that even for myself, like I have openly considered, like, maybe that's going to be more realistic for me, just because, I mean, for one, the requirements that right now are in place for bikini, I'm kind of iffy about like whether or not I want to use much of anything. It's not to say I want to be natural, but I hear a lot of the cycles that fit model girls are running, and it's sad because it is like top coaches that are encouraging such heavy drug use even at the fit model level. And to hear that, I'm like, man, like that's a bummer. Like we're talking about, girls that I wouldn't ever recommend cycle this for even bikini, let alone wellness. And to hear that, I'm like, okay, well, I remember when wellness came out. That was actually like I did the Cal State and I did wellness and bikini. And I won the overall in wellness. And at the time they were like, Tam or Tara were like, yeah, go full send on wellness, go to nationals. And I'm like, that's not what the look's gonna be in a year. Like, I promise it's not, and I mean, like, ironically, it's like now that's become a completely different division than what it started as. And I kind of see the same thing with Fit Model. I think the pros are going to be more competitive than what we're seeing even at the national level. And I mean, like, shoot, like I could see someone like Janet, who has been in the sport. She's refined, her process. I could see her jumping on stage and like doing a show and Fit Model and it being like, hey, this is not easy, but it's much more representative of the look that I can sustain and I can achieve without necessarily crossing that threshold. And I use her only because I saw like a video of her hitting Fit Model posing, and I'm like, I could see it. I could see her just like coming back and being like, yeah, like I'm not gonna toy with this to see if I can win a Miss Olympia in a different division. But it's exciting. It's exciting to say the least. And I think it's sad that so many coaches and like kind of spectators of the sport like downplay it and like say like, oh, it's just your average girl in a bikini, like it's just someone getting on stage with no prep. It's like the level of muscularity isn't like it's not far from where bikini was not that long ago.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think when it comes to structure and like even someone's decision around like family planning and like wanting to have kids in the near future, I think it's a great option, especially for myself, like bringing clients in who want to try the sport but don't necessarily want to wait 2, 3, or 4 years to get on stage. So I'm excited to see what it evolves to. Um, so I guess when we look at like, okay, your plans, they're kind of up in the air post Olympia, but I mean, at the Olympia, like you have a really competitive physique you're going to bring. So I'm excited, and I'm sure listeners are too, to see how that pans out. And, hopefully it very much is in your favor. Do you plan to hit another show beforehand, or is it just Olympia from there here on in?
No, we're not planning on doing any more, which maybe we would have if we didn't end up doing so many shows. But at this point, it's not like my physique will have. I can understand maybe like last year, since I qualified in April and I took like an improvement season over the summertime, I wanted to do a warm up show. So like my peak physique's going to be different. And make sure we were fine for the Olympia because it would have been like 6 months since I'd gotten on stage. But now that it will only be like 8 weeks, and I've already asked my body to do so much and traveled so many weekends of this year, we're not going to do any more before the Olympia because we have a really good idea of, I think, how to bring the peak and everything. So I'm just going to rest and focus on bringing my best. And then after that, the plan is no more, but maybe we'll end up jumping into one. We'll see.
That's so exciting. And I do want to plug because I know you're based in Austin and you're able to help a lot of athletes like myself, and those who do what we both do. Where are you based out of in terms of the IV services? What's the name of the location?
Our clinic is called Neurophonics, and we're inside the collective gym in the South Congress area. So, but it's open to anybody that wants to come in. But we do get a lot of our clients in from that gym and then people from the outside as well.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, yeah, you guys, if you're in Austin, and I mean, like, I'm not even going to give the sales pitch. If you need anything under the sun of health and wellness, definitely hit Brittany up. And Brittany, I'm excited to follow along with all of your updates as you go into the Olympia. I know listeners are going to find this helpful. Where can people tune into your content?
I primarily post on my Instagram, but I know I'm working on posting more. And I'm gonna say it now, so I hold myself to it. I've been asked to make a YouTube channel and I've wanted to do it for so long. Even if it's, nothing fancy. I really want to be able to share more like we are doing now to help others. So that should hopefully be coming soon. And I have been posting on TikTok recently too to kind of share in a little bit of a different way with the same username as my Instagram, which is just Britt Gillespie with an extra E on the end and one T in Brit. And then yeah, hopefully I will share more on YouTube in depth about Olympia prep and about nursing and about combining the two and just be able to just sit down and chat and share more.
Amazing. Yeah. You guys, go give her a follow, go tune in. Brittany has a killer physique, and it's been really cool to follow it thus far. And I know you guys are going to show up looking incredible for the Olympia. Thank you so much for doing this. You guys, thank you for listening. And as always, I will see you in the next one.